DrumWise Meets. Today I'm with a drummer who's played with the likes of Foreigner and Cher. He currently plays Pink. I'm with Mark Schulman. What age did you get into drums, and can you remember what your first drum set was?
So my humble beginnings are just like so many drummers, but I was a little bit younger. I was like 2 or 3, and I saw the Beatles on Ed Sullivan, and I saw John and George and Paul, and I was so excited. I remember like standing in front of the TV, my older brother trying to push me out of the way, and then I saw Ringo, that big beautiful nose and that smile and the way he was swishing, and then I saw the screaming girls, and I said, "I want that." Then it's like, "Mama, I want to play drums," and she's like, "No, drums are, can't you play a nice instrument like your brother Randy? He plays violin." So I ended up studying with my godfather who was teaching my brother violin. I ended up playing cello for many years. But at 5 years old, I sat down at a drum set in one of the neighbor's house, and I could just play. Like I just knew intuitively what to do. I wasn't like a prodigy necessarily, but I knew intuitively what to do. And at 9 years old, they could deny my passion no longer. And I got my first kit. It was a Slingerland Radio King kit, which I wish to God I still had. And I started playing in bands immediately. Played my first professional gig at 12, and then from the ages of 14 on, every weekend, man, I was playing professionally, school dances, weddings, bar mitzvahs. I was making quite a bit of dough, quite a bit of money, actually, because we played all these different styles. And that's when I just learned a lot about playing with a band and playing different styles. We were doing like jazz standards for grandma, and we were doing like, hits of the day and like, classic rock at the time, which wasn't even called classic rock because, you know, Sweet Home Alabama or whatever, and Zeppelin and Deep Purple. I was big Ian Pace Deep Purple fan. And so, I had a natural ability. It was a calling. I say the drums chose me. I didn't choose drums. But then it was up to me to allow the muse to come through me and then do the work. And because I continually played in bands, and then I started studying with Freddie Gruber, the famed teacher, through my current teacher, Bruce Becker, who's, in my estimation, the greatest teacher on the planet these days. And Bruce was a very studied fan and student of Freddie's for 25 years. But that really kind of flipped my head around getting to that level of study. Freddie ended up working with Neil Peart and Steve Smith and all these amazing people. But I always was the sort of the guy that was recording the bands too. So I always had my ear on the production. And I played every chop I knew as a teenager. But then finally, when I had an original band in my 20s, I started to realize, wait a minute, that is not what it's about. And as a producer, I saw the aggregate, I saw the total experience of the band, and I realized, well, this is what I need to do to make the music work better. And then I finally had my chance for my big audition with Bad English. It was the guys from Journey and John Waite, amazing British singer. And I totally botched it up. I was so nervous. I was rushing and I had horrible anxiety. And that was one of those pivotal moments because I thought I was ready. That was a moment I knew I was either going to, jump off that stage and put it down and say, forget it, or work my ass off. And I opted to work my ass off. So for the next 2 years, I studied the rhythm course because I knew, the foundation, if I'm rushing, even under very stressful situations, that still means I do not have inner control of my personal meter, which is critical, not only for drummers, for everybody. And I taught Charlie Burchell of Simple Minds that because he's all like, it's the drummer's job to keep time. No, it's everybody's job to keep time because that rhythm course that's still being taught by my buddy Tom Mendola is for everybody, not just for drummers. And it literally, like, I didn't even touch the sticks for a couple of months. I was just clapping, clapping to every tempo and being able to cancel out so you couldn't hear the click for 1 minute at every tempo from 40 to 220. And I just really worked hard to make sure, because my goal was like, nobody's ever going to tell me that I'm speeding up or slowing down unless I want to speed up or slow down. Not like there's anything wrong with speeding up or slowing down, because sometimes you organically do it. It's just understand and have the control, because that way you are in control of the tempo and you can go with the band. Sometimes the band's just jaked up. They've had too much coffee. Sometimes they haven't had enough sleep and they're slowing down. And And, depending on whether you're playing with a click track or a Pro Tools rig or not, depending on whether you can shut it off or not. I mean, I actually have shut off clicks before. I remember with Foreigner, Lou Graham one night's like, "Hey man, pick it up." Like he was so jaked. And I was the one in charge of the click. I always started and stopped the sequences with my left heel. I use the roll in momentary pedal. And so I said, hell with it. I'll turn it off. Oh no, that's not what happened then. I've turned it off a few other times. Right then, since these sequences were critical and there were backing vocals and that we were playing with like a loop or something, all I did is I sort of pushed on top of the beat. So it gave the impression that I was playing faster without actually playing faster. And he turns around, he's like, "Great, man." So we can actually change the feel and change the perception of the feel. If you push on top of the beat, it gives the feeling that you're playing actually a faster tempo. And if you lay back behind the beat, it gives the feeling you're actually slowing down when you're not. You're just playing around. And that's something else I worked on for years, just really trying to master my ability to work around the click. So some choruses I might want to drive a little bit, some verses I might want to pull back, and the click is staying exactly where it is. And that gives us tremendous value and tremendous understanding and control of what the perception of what we create for ourselves and for everybody else. Because there's literally a emotion attached to if you're pushing the beat, there it gives a different emotion. It gives a feeling of sort of angst, and that's like the punk players play that way. And if you're laid back, it kind of makes it a little more sexy. And it depends on the emotion you are trying to create, because we're trying to create emotion with our emotion, literally. So that's one of the things that I learned. It was just fabulous. But that was from doing the work.
And talking about playing with click then, so do you feel that that's an important thing for people that are studying, actively studying drums, or at the beginning of their drum journey, practicing to a click? Do you feel that's an important
I think
thing?
it's critical. I think it's critical. I still, when I'm practicing something, if I'm going through a book or I'm trying to do a specific snare drum piece or something, which I mean, I rarely practice these days. I'm trying to give myself more practice time. There's a lot going on. Um, it's critical because then you're just developing that internal sense naturally. Because there's something called entraining. It is literally like gravity. It's like a universal occurrence. If you put two old school ticking clocks in the room, one room together, eventually they tick together. So you entrain yourself and you train yourself with that meter. And it also enables you to memorize meters like 120. If you clock that, that's going to be 120 or damn near. So from that reference point, I can look like when I'm playing live gigs and I don't have a click and I've just written down the tempo, I can reference the tempo from 120. But it's critical that everybody has the responsibility of building their own internal time. So I say play with the click as much as you can. And every show I've done, last, three tours of the Pink tour, everything is on a click because the guy that's running the Pro Tools rig, which is where we get all of the samples and the click and all of the audio, he's sending what they call SMPTE, which is a time code to the lighting operator, the aerial operator, the video operator. So everything's on a click. There are a few things we do freeform, but so we all need to be on it. And so it's a critical part of what we do. And Joe Picaro, I'll never forget, I studied with Joe for a little bit. And one of the things he told me changed my life because I was a little intimidated by the click at first when I was really getting into it, especially after that experience with bad English, because I'd already worked with sequences and I thought I had it together. But he said, think of a click like that click, set it to a cowbell sound or something, and to just pretend like you're playing with a percussionist with a really great time. And I played with Lenny Castro. I did the Stevie Nicks gig. Lenny is like Buddha, man. He's got time like this. It just doesn't budge, man. So that took the pressure off. And then I also realized I could, as I said earlier, I could play around with it. I can pull back, I can push ahead. And so I spent a lot of time just feeling very, very comfortable. And then when you're not playing with a click, also you've worked with a click so much that you have internalized the time. So you feel more confident without the click because you've developed that internal sense of time that's so critical. Now, as I said, but this is not just for drummers. And every band I've ever been in, I always say that. I say, look, I'm not setting the time. What gives the band the feel is where everybody individually feels the time. That's why the Police felt like they felt, Zeppelin feels like they feel, Panic at the Disco feels the way they feel, the Struts feel the way they feel. Um, you know, it's based on how every individual member feels the pulse. Some people feel it naturally behind, some people feel it naturally ahead. And that's the beauty of it. That's the beauty of playing with different musicians is you get to kind of feel and experience playing with people that have a different perception of time.
Mm. Absolutely. And um, possibly something that other people don't realize as well, with some bands, everyone will have the click in their ear. So is that something
Yes.
you have, have experienced? I mean, for example, on the Pink gig, does everyone have a click, or do most people have a
Yeah,
click?
it changes. Sometimes everybody has a click for cues. Usually, the musical director Jason always has the click. I always have the click. I don't know. I think Eva, the bass player, has it sometimes. Justin has it sometimes. I don't know if Adriana, the second keyboard player, how much she has it, but it comes in and out. Even the boss will have it for cues sometimes. So there's a different set, they call it, or a different scene for each song, because we all get our own monitor mixes. So for me, it's obviously critical. For the musical director, it's critical. Um, but sometimes they just want to click off and they're just basically playing with me and we're playing as a band, and it doesn't feel awkward because we're all also so used to the way each other plays that we're going to play like a tight unit, and I can play with the click and they don't have to worry about it. And I keep the click very low. I don't keep it high. I keep it low just as a reference point, because I'm so used to it now that I don't want to go boom boom. It's like another player. I'm just playing along with it. I'm not thinking about staying with a click. I'm simply playing the music, and the click is just a small part of that music. And it's like over the years, the click's gotten more quiet and more quiet and more quiet. Because when I'm locked, I'm, what we call canceling out the click. I'm just playing right with the click so much that you're not really hearing the click anyway, unless I'm consciously trying to pull back or push. And it also lines your limbs up for new students. One critical thing about the click is you can subdivide it. So you may have quarter notes, and you can subdivide it into eighth notes or sixteenths, and then you can really feel where the individual limbs and the individual beats might be a little bit off. And again, the concept of in training, it's not even like you necessarily even have to work at it. Naturally, if you slow down the tempo and you start playing with it, your body will naturally, because like gravity, will naturally start to link in and just sync up with the click, because it is that occurrence. So that's what's so wonderful about it. Just by putting in the time, you're doing enough work, and it improves your time. It improves the evenness of the limbs, which is really critical, because that's one of my biggest critiques of students, even in the mid to almost semi-pro level, is like the limbs aren't completely lined up, and I can hear it and they can't hear it. So I say, I want you to start working with a click at slow tempos and take all your vocabulary, your simple things that you play. I'm not telling you to learn new stuff. Take what you do and perfect what you do by playing it with a click, so you know that everything is really even, and you're going to see your propensities to speed up in certain fills. You're going to rush, and you just start to naturally set it up so your tempo and your feel is in your control.
Great advice. Great advice.
Thanks, man.
I think this next one I've intentionally made a difficult question. Some people find this one a tough one, and I actually would struggle with this one. If you had to pick just one, could you tell us who your all-time favorite drummer is?
Yeah, for me, I actually have that picked out. My favorite living drummer is Vinny. My favorite deceased drummer is Buddy.
Simple.
Simple. I've seen Vinny play live and he's moved me to tears. I just feel like he has a connection with spirit and the muse or whatever that is so he has so much freedom uh, to just move and go places that I literally just like my jaw has dropped. And Buddy was that way too. I mean, I heard some video of Buddy. He had done some little mini film when he was 12 years old, and they didn't have um, video available that you just had the audio, and he was in a candy store. He's like, "Hey, mister, you got some candy?" And he has some drumsticks, starts playing all over the candy store. Same buddy. It's like he just had this thing, and it just this freedom and just this just uncanny technical ability, and this uncanny sense of swing that you know puts him on top of the heap. But I'm a fan of so many drummers, brother. I always look for what I like. So I adore. Um, like a lot of them are really good friends of mine. Antonio Sanchez is a good friend of mine. Stanton Moore, Abe Jr., Josh Fries, Greg Bissonette. Um, you listen to Jeff Hamilton. I love Bill Stewart. Both of the Blade brothers. I know I'm leaving out a gazillion more people. I mean, Glenn Sobel's brilliant. It's like I always there's so much to learn. Oh, El Negro. Horacio Hernandez has just got. I did a little clinic tour with him in Australia, and I was just gobsmacked. So I mean, there's just so much brilliance. What can you say?
And I think it's an ongoing thing as well. I've said this to a few people that, my main influence when I was 15, when I started, is still a big influence, but it may not be my main influence now. I think,
Right.
we grow as musicians, don't we? And we evolve.
Yeah.
There's many different influences that go into being a good drummer.
Yeah, absolutely. It's we are the coolest people on the planet, man. We have the most fun. I'm convinced drummers have the most fun. Yeah.
Speaking about having fun, what's been the highlight of your career so far?
Wow. Um, well, definitely some of the experiences with Pink. I mean, there are two recent experiences. We did stadiums this summer. I mean, she broke sales and attendance records. We did like 30 to 100,000 people in Europe. So two of the highlights of that, one was playing Wembley Stadium, which I had never played 2 nights in a row. And it was the wildest thing because it was the hottest gig of all the gigs in the summer. And it's the two gigs we were filming. And the first night was so hot that like everybody's makeup, I don't wear makeup, but the girls' makeup's like melting off. They're like, come on, really? And then we did Rock in Rio, and that was a bucket list. And I just love Brazil. And I went down to Laba, which is where samba started. And I actually sat in and jammed with a band. I got to play like shaker with this little local band. I was so honored. So those are really a couple that stand out, particularly recently.
They're pretty good highlights.
Yeah.
So, from an educational point of view here, when you first get a gig with a new artist, or if you're recording a session or something like that, how do you learn the material? So, do you just listen? Do you listen and then transcribe? Or are you given a whole folder of all of the drum music and they go, here, here's the entire thing written out for you? So, how does that work?
It's that's never happened. I mean, I've gone to sessions where I've been given music, but when it comes to learning the tour stuff, they give us a song. I think that so many drummers, myself included, have our own sort of charting system that we do. Everybody's is slightly different, but it's very similar. I remember going to a Greg Bissonette clinic years ago and saying, "Oh, he does what I do." I remember looking at Brian Tishy's charts because we played some of the same gigs, and he kind of does what I do. I actually have a DVD I did called "A Day in the Recording Studio" that came out about 11 years ago, and I go into full detail about my charting system, which is basically a roadmap because I want to have my concentration on the music and not in the music, not on the music, so to speak. So I just do roadmaps and I put in, something like 8 bar groove. I might write out the groove and then I put in the kicks if I didn't. I'll write that in. But to me, that's a lot easier when I'm not completely immersed. And that works really well for me. And it enables me to learn stuff very, very quickly and chart it out very, very quickly. I know, like my dear friend Kenny Aronoff, Kenny charts things to a T. It's like, dude, how do you do that? I mean, that's amazing to me. Um, but I use it as a roadmap, and I'll never forget, man. I got called to do this Japanese gig last minute. They weren't happy with the drummer, so I got called to play with Ikichi Yazawa, who's like they call him the boss. He's one of the big Japanese artists, and so I came in. I literally was charting the songs out on the plane for 2 hours. I landed. They were going to give me two. They gave me 2 days to practice myself, and then they gave me new tapes when I got in. It was completely different, So I recharted everything. Actually, I had one day because then I was going to go listen to the band play live. And then we were going to have 2 days of rehearsal. Well, I, brought my charts to the first gig. He had me sit in on one song. He's like, "Oh, this is amazing! You played tonight." Yet he didn't want any charts on the stage. So the drum tech helped me sort of hide the charts. Luckily, I wrote them big and I rewrote them, I think, to make them bigger. They were down to the side. They were road maps. So I didn't have to do this the whole time. I could be a band member and still look, but I had the reference points and I was able to play 2 hours of Japanese rock, which is a little more challenging because you're a lot of times you actually subconsciously cue off the vocal, but it was in Japanese except for a few English choruses. So there's a lot of value in that to me, like just having that. Even when I go and do these jams in LA, man, I usually just listen to the song. I usually don't even have a chance to practice it. I just chart it out, and uh, like when I do like Lucky Strike, and like Glenn Sobel's a house drummer, and he's reading charts too, and he's got a music stand. So I just throw it on the music stand. I'm just playing. I'm just reading it. If they don't have a music stand, I put it on the second floor tom, or I tape it to the bass drum. I mean, we do what we got to do. We just want to stay with it, you know. And the funniest thing that ever happened to me though is like I remember Greg Bissonette was in this amazing Beatles band, right? And his wife went into labor, and I got called at 8:30, and I said, "Can you come and sub?" I'm like, "Hell yeah!" Because I'm the biggest Beatles freak on the planet. Greg had a whole all the charts all written out. I didn't look at the charts once because like I know not that I play them, but I know every song, even the entire second side of Abbey Road with a click without any music, just because I knew it. And then Brett Tuggle, who I played with Stevie Nicks, comes with me afterward and writes me a check for $100. I'm like, "You mean I get paid for this?" I was like, it was such a joyful gig for me, man.
Oh, that's awesome. That's a good story. Yeah, because I think a lot of people don't put any value. No, that's the wrong way of saying it. Some people don't appreciate how important reading drum music is. Obviously, it's not essential at all for, if you're the drummer in a band and you're a successful band, great. But if you want to be a working musician, I feel like why not learn it? It can only help.
Well, it's critical. It's like if you couldn't read a book, what it is, it's communication. It's communicating a dialogue and a vocabulary. So if you don't learn how to read, I mean, you can't be great. Buddy didn't read, but Buddy also had a photographic memory. They'd have another drummer come in and play the big band chart, and he would have it memorized. So if you got a photographic memory, great. You don't need to learn how to read. But all other, it just increases your chances to work. The better you can read, you know, they say if you can read shit off a fly paper, right? Like the guys, like I'm not that great of a sight reader, but somebody like Vinny will come and, like it's sight read. I learned the black page, right? It took me quite a long time. Whereas like when Vinny came in to audition, he just played it, sight unseen, just sight reading the whole damn thing. So the better you are at reading, the better your chances are of working, period.
Have you ever had anything go wrong on stage that you've had to recover from?
Oh yeah. Well, I told you I'm playing with a click, right? So this happened a couple of times where like one of the batteries in my pack goes out. So I'm wearing in-ears. And the only thing I can then hear is the echo off of the back of the wall. And so, and I don't really have chance. I'm just sort of desperately sweating, and I would look over at Jay like ears. So he's like, then Jay, the MD's sort of like doing this. He's telegraphing the time, or I'm going to be like screwed, and I'm going to sound like, what the hell's wrong with the drummer? Especially one time it was when she was in the middle of doing this whole aerial stunt. And I literally got freaked out because I thought, if I can't keep the time for her, she's relying on me. So that was actually almost a frightening moment for me because of how much she was depending upon me. So that was a freaky moment. Really, a couple of freaky moments, but one of them I'll tell, like when we were playing in Europe and we were doing "So What," the last song, and Pink runs to the front of the stage. She's clipped in with two carabiner clips by the dancers that attached to each carabiner clip are two high tension cables that stretch across the entire audience, and she gives a signal to the computer operator. He lifts her up, and then she does that whole crazy flips and turns, and doing 30 miles an hour. I don't know what that is in kilometers. Drops of 10 meters. Which is what, 30 feet. Well, one night we were in Germany. It was crazy audience. They were so loud. She came running out. She ran down on the front of the stage, and they clipped her in. And she immediately gave the signal to the computer operator, and one of the carabiner clips was turned upside down, and the dancer didn't have a chance to warn her. And it took about 2 seconds for the computer operator to hit the kill switch, and instead of getting lifted up over the audience, she got brutally and rapidly by one side of her um, harness dragged across the stage over hot lighting cans. She got yanked off the side of the stage 2 meters, 6 feet into the pit, and then she got pulled up against the metal side railing where I couldn't even see her. I literally stopped breathing. I had tears in my eyes. I thought she was dead, literally. And then I heard the sweetest sound. It was the sound of Pink cussing. She was cussing. She was alive. She was breathing. She was angry. But what happened next was crazy, because then she had Carrie, her husband, had run down into the pit when he'd seen what happened. She had Carrie lift her back onto the stage. The poor girl was battered and bruised. Look, she had broken her leg. She was leaning on his shoulder. And the first thing, like in a feeble voice, she apologizes to the audience, like, "I'm so sorry, everybody, but I think I'm too injured to play the last song, but I feel so bad. I want to, do whatever I could do, so I'm offering to give everybody their money back," with only one song left. And then they hauled her off on the stretcher, and then the audience was screaming even louder. And I looked in the eyes of the audience. Half the people were in tears. I was in tears. It was like one of the most frightening moments, because we thought we lost Pink, and not one person asked for their money back, by the way.
Good.
And then 2 days later, we were back up. She's built like a tank, man. She didn't break any bones. I mean, like a mere mortal like me, I would have been laid up in the hospital for like a month. She didn't break any bones. She didn't break any skin. We went right back up. She did the rig check at sound check, and that night we were not only doing So What, and she was not only doing, that aerial stunt we call the 360, but to this day, it remains the show closer, because that's just who she is.
Wow.
So talk about taking a situation that was just like, she literally could have died. I mean, had it been one more second, I shudder to think, you
Oh.
know.
Did you guys keep playing when that happened?
Oh no, dude, the audience was dead silent. We were dead silent, and she was dead silent. It was like the most. That was a moment where I literally thought she was dead. Everybody was like completely in shock. And what do you say?
Oh, cool. Wow.
Yeah.
Well, thank goodness that she was all right and not, you know,
Oh,
not injured at all. Cool. Yeah, that's quite a big thing that's gone wrong on stage. There we go. Wow.
yeah.
Um, Now, just moving on to gear for a sec, can you talk us through your equipment setup and maybe talk to us a bit about what electronic setup you have as well?
Well, for me, I use what is musically appropriate. Now, I could certainly scale down and use less, because I originally started using less when I first started playing with Pink, and it was my tech that said, "Why don't we start adding a few things?" But after a while, I now find them musically essential. So I've got and I'm using a Gretsch Broadcaster kit that's customized with just one lug in the middle and long rod, so it looks like an old student kit. And the sound of the broadcasters is amazing. It's poplar, it's maple, poplar, maple, and it's like 3 ply. It's like really old school, so much tone. Um, so I play 10, 12, 8, and the 8 is a concert tone. 16, 18, 14 on the side, my signature snare drum from Gretsch, the 12-inch version to the left, a hammered brass, or actually I have a solid maple that was custom painted, um, and by my artist friend whose name is escaping me at the moment. Um, and then I use, I think, 13 or 14 cymbals, because I love really bright, big crashes and really dark stacks. So I use a lot of evolutions that are stacked, and hi-hats and an arrow, like an evolution on top of an arrow. And then I use really big AA thin crashes, because they're big. I hit pretty hard, but because they're big, they endure it, because I still like that real sizzle. And I use 15-inch groove hats. I was using 16s for a bit, but I couldn't control them. And all Gibraltar hardware, and Brent Barnett just built me the greatest Gibraltar rack that I just said, you go for it, dude. We just stood there. Me and Gary Grimm, my tech, just stood there in awe. But it's so big that Gary's like, I ain't gonna break this thing down every night. So we got two huge cases. It splits in the middle, and he puts them in the cases, and it's done. The cases are like the size of like a little Japanese apartment, you know. Um, and then the electronics, I'm using, the TD50 with about four pads that I trigger, and then the T-bar pad in front. Um, and that's it for the paint gig. And I control all of the electronics myself. I actually have still use the Roland momentary pedal I've been using since 1988 with my heel that I start and stop the click when I'm getting tempos. And then I have an advanced pedal in the middle. Oh, I also use the Roland bass drum, that kick drum trigger that faces down. It just looks like a whatever. I forget what the model number is, but that's great. And that's in between all the other pedals. So I have quite a few pedals down there. So remember, I use a straight stand snare drum that comes off of the rack because there's so much going on down there. I can't even fit a regular tripod snare drum stand. I've never endorsed any other cymbals. I've been with Sabian since 1988, but I've tried different sticks, different heads. My feeling about gear is, you play what you like. Gear is like food or like your mate. You can't. We all like what we like. Like Mexican food's my favorite. It's my wife's least favorite. I can talk to her until she's blue in the face about how great Mexican food is, and she's never gonna like it. Like I can maybe try to have somebody appreciate what I like, but they're gonna like what they like. So I play the gear I like. And, I used to go in and go into the studios, and a lot of times I'd be on the road and I'd get off the road and I just would then do sessions in between the road. I'd say, you guys provide whatever you want. I didn't even have any gear stored. I was using, Paul Jameson for a while as my tech, Picar's old tech. I was using just different people, Mike Fasano a lot. But I tell the producer and the engineer, whatever kit you want, you get it. And like, 90% of the time it was a Gretsch, you know, that was kind of the favorite. So after a while, I was like, I might as well stop messing around and just play what I believe to be the greatest drum. I love my DW kits. I mean, I played Pearl. There were some components of Pearl I just adored. Um, Mapex makes great snare drums. I was a Mapex guy for a while. So everybody makes some great gear.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of what's comfortable. Sticks and heads are very personal. Sticks especially because stick is the one point of contact. And I'm just an X55B freak for Vic Firth. We've talked about creating a signature stick, but I wouldn't want to create a signature stick unless there's something I would change. And why change it if it works? So I don't want to do it just for ego. And the Mark Schulman signature drum that Gretsch had out for 5 years at one point was the hottest selling Gretsch signature product ever. But it wasn't because it had my name on it. I'm not that well known, you know. It's because I was doing a bunch of clinics and I was talking to John Palmer, who was a design engineer at the time, and I was saying, we need, because I like having a satellite snare. I said we need a satellite snare in the line. We're talking about what Gretsch. I'm like a part of the. I feel like I'm a part of the company. So we need something like a 6-inch depth that's fat but really crispy, with like really thick snares and maybe a 6 and to 12 and a 13-inch version. So it's got the depth, but it's really tight and crispy. By the end of the conversation, we designed the Mark Schulman snare drum. So that's how it came about. It was very organic. I didn't get rich. It's not like I'm making like $1 million off of a signature drum. You get a small percentage, but it was a legacy piece. And I was very proud to have my name on it because a lot of people just thought it was a great drum. And not because my name's on it, because it was a great drum.
Awesome. So just moving away from drums for two questions here, because I think these are nice questions just to get to know the interviewee. So, what are your hobbies away from drums?
Well, as many people know, I mean, I've become a very successful corporate speaker. I speak for Fortune 500 companies on top performance and the main foundation being the power of attitude. I'm co-writing my second book. The first one was called Conquering Life's Stage Fright, 3 Steps to Top Performance, which was basically 3 steps: clarity, capability, and confidence, about how you need to have clear goals and you got to develop your capability, and that leads naturally to confidence. And then I interviewed a whole bunch of people, like, top performers in every industry, from CEOs to world-class athletes to experts in the areas of sales, technology, healthcare, finance, insurance. And I'm doing the same on this book, but this is a different triad. It's called A times B equals C. And this is the most powerful formula I've ever learned in my life. And the gentleman that's co-writing the book with me created it, Dr. Jim Samuels, who's like Tony Robbins, but never cared about being famous, but he's that type of thinker. And it's based on the foundation, and anybody could take this information and apply it right at this moment, because we cannot control what happens to us, and we know that. Look at this global pandemic, right? But we always have the power, regardless of what happens to us, to control change, or what I call shift our attitudes about what's happening to us. And your attitude is so powerful because your attitude is your point of view. It's where you're looking from. Where you're looking from determines what you see or what you perceive. Remember, it's not what you look at, it's what you see. And your attitude is profound in the influence it can have on you based on the stories you tell yourself about yourself. It's the lens through which you see yourself and the lens through which you see the rest of the world. And what is so profound about attitude, taking it a step further, is your attitude is actually what drives your behavior. And one attitude can drive many behaviors. So if you know that you can consciously shift your attitude, you can drive more desirable behaviors, and your behavior is what determines the consequences of your life, the outcomes. Think about that much power. And so, yes, I'm suggesting that by shifting your attitude, you can drive different outcomes in your life. And what I ask people is, I say, when you hear about a formula like this, what kind of person are you? Are you the person who's interested, or are you the person who's committed? Because if you're interested, again, you probably tell yourself a story, whatever, I might try it, I might not. If you're committed, you will try that formula and you will see how it works yourself. And that's the dare that I pose to everybody. But you need to be committed, because what happens is, what I tell people is, I say, start retroactively, start reverse engineering. Think of specific outcomes or goals, like with your playing, with your health, with your family, with your relationship, and then backtrack and think, what behavior would I need to create on a consistent basis to drive and create those results? And then you go all the way back to attitude, because everything begins with attitude. What attitude shift what I need to manifest? And sometimes I shift my attitude 50 or 100 times a day to keep that behavior where it needs to be to drive those consequences. So I get up and I talk about this to corporate audiences. Same thing I say at my drum clinics. Basically, it's like a drum clinic. I play drums, I demonstrate on drums still. Now I'm moving it online, but that's my hobby. My hobby is like being of service to the planet. And I listen to so many amazing people and read so many books, and there's so many brilliant philosophers. Dom Famularo was one of my original inspirations to even go ahead and do this. And then I studied with 2 speaking coaches, an acting coach, a storyteller, a director, to get my presentation skills up. So now I get up in front of, like, anywhere between 25 and 7,000 people, and it's just me, and I'm up there to entertain, to educate, and to engage these people and change their lives, because I feel like my life is about being of service. So that's, and of course, my family is the most important. I've got the most incredible families, incredible wife, and the smartest and most insightful 10-year-old daughter, and she was a little miracle. I wasn't supposed to be able to even have kids. I'm a cancer survivor. I tell that story about how shifting my attitude, even with that, created different behavior and outcomes. So that is my shtick, man. And so, look out for the book. Right now, I call it Hacking the Rockstar Attitude. The name may change, but that's the name of my speech. But the irony is, even when I do drum clinics now, which I rarely do, but when I do, I did 1,000 drum clinics in my day. This all came from what I learned from doing drum clinics, basically telling stories. These have more takeaways attached to them, and playing drums to demonstrate. I just play a lot more drums when I do a drum clinic, because people like to hear, the paranormals and whatever a diddles and all that stuff. But I love playing drums. but I feel like I got a higher purpose. So that's my evolution and that's my hobby now.
And yeah, great hobby. Yeah.
And my family. My family's my hobby, I say, because I want to spend as much time as I can with my family in and around my work. So, we you know go to the swimming pool. We do a lot of stuff. My daughter's in a martial arts. She's got a red belt. I go and help, push her to train every day because we got a big bag hanging in our converted garage. And so, while we're in COVID and she can't go to class, so it's that's the stuff that I'm looking at. So hobby, well, my hobby is just is living my life to the fullest and being of the greatest service I can be.
What's your favorite cookie?
Cookie, anything with peanut butter, man. I'm a nut butter freak. Like we have cashew butter and almond butter. I try to stay away from peanut butter because it's got so much saturated fat. But I literally sometimes before I go to sleep will just take a spoonful of cashew or almond butter. So I should say any cookie that's made with nut butter and as much nut butter as possible. Like my favorite ice cream is like dark chocolate made with real peanut butter.
Oh.
So anybody want to send me nut butters? Hey, I take nut butters. I'll give you my address if you got some special cookie or some special nut butter that you want to brag about, man. I'm in.
So my last one, um, if you could just give one bit of advice to up and coming drummers, what would that be?
Um, Attitude first. Attitude first. Here's a quick attitude shift for you. When you sit down on that stool, what is that stool called? It is a throne. You are the king. We are the luckiest people on the planet. If you are able to sit down and play drums and practice an instrument, first of all, 90% of the people on the planet don't even get to do that. The next thing is when you do it, as opposed to thinking about, oh, I have to practice, shift it to a get to. I get to practice. Make it your choice. Put yourself in the cause position of what you do. So that way you get to enjoy it a little bit more. In other words, if you think about something like it's a chore, like I have to do it as opposed to a choice, I get to do it, it really shifts your mindset and your attitude of when you sit down. So if you can remember that, they're very simple concepts that are so powerful. I mean, when I sit down, I played So What by Pink 800 times by this point. Every single time, man. Also, my philosophy is that every single note I play matters because I attach a sense of purpose to every note. If you do everything with purpose, you become so passionate about it. Purpose is what drives everything we do. So those are a few words of wisdom. So every note matters, man. Don't let anything slip by. Really, like, I get to do this, and every note matters, and how lucky, how grateful I am. I'm one of the biggest gratitude junkies. I think about gratitude every day, what I'm grateful for, all the little things, all the little nuances, my family, whatever success I have. I do what I call the wins formula, where Dr. Jim, my co-writer, has me do this every single day. Think about your wins from the last day, because the more you think about the wins, the more you're building up. It's like building up fuel, for more wins. Then you move forward and project your wins for the next day. Like think about it so you're visualizing what your wins are going to be. And when you sit down to practice, think about the goal of the practice that day. What do I get to do? I'm working on the snare drum etude. How about if I take it from 60 BPM to 90 today? Because a lot of people say, how long should I practice? I say, I don't know. How long does it take you to take it from 60 BPM to 90 BPM? Some days I'll be like, 3 hours into it, like having not even sipped any water and forget and have to go to the bathroom. Other days, a half hour is enough.
So, Mark, thank you so much for spending your time with us here at DrumWise today. It's been a pleasure talking with you.
It is my pleasure, my friend.